In 21st century, it is hard to imagine that there are still places on Earth unreachable for people. However, there are more than 500,000 islands on our planet, many of which are still underexplored or completely uninhabited. And in this video, we will talk about 10 unusual islands that are impossible for tourists to reach. Surtsey Island, Iceland. This island is located mere 30 kilometers from the coast of Iceland. Its peculiarity is that it was formed as a result of eruptions in 1963 to 1967, and since that time the island has been guarded. Since the isle was kept out of human endeavor, it gives an opportunity for the international scientific world to study the process of formation of new ecosystems in real-time mode. Over the years of observation, scientists were able to see nascents of vegetation, fungi and mold, seeds and spores of which have been brought to the island by oceanic currents. After a while, birds began to inhabit the island, at first only as a pit stop during migration, but the more vegetation there were, the more often some species recognized Surtsey as their home ground. And then seals began to set their rookeries on the shore, attracting orca whales to the island as well. Of the man-made creations on the island, there is only a cabin for scientists, plus a weather station and a webcam for monitoring the new ecosystem. Heard Island, Australia. This island belongs to the whole archipelago of the southern part of the Indian Ocean. Its rocky shores and cold climate makes it unlivable for men. However, Heard Island is not only unusable but also dangerous, since it is nothing more than the top of an underwater volcano which has been keeping quiet for the time being. And this is the only volcano that is active today in Australia. Concurrently, the island also became the highest point belonging to modern Australia. Yep, the island belongs to the very same dry and hot Australia, and it is completely covered with ice. Despite the danger and the prohibition for visiting the island, people there are still sometimes appear there, for example, for filming a movie. Additionally, there is also the only building on Heard, a weather station, which was active from 1947 to 1954. Today it is already abandoned and desolated, like the whole Heard Island. Ilha de Queimada Grande, or Snake Island, Brazil. If the volcanic islands can be considered safe at all, then Queimada Grande is a real island of death. And it's not in the least connected to climate. It's all about its inhabitants, venomous snakes. The small island is located in the Atlantic Ocean within 35 kilometers from the shore of Brazil. It looks like a little paradise for vacation, crystal water, lush greenery, and a total absence of tourists. However, the concentration of poisonous neighbors is that high, a couple of snakes per square meter of islands, that you will be able to relax as much as a couple of minutes before you get a lethal dose of venom. There is a legend that in the lighthouse, which is located on the island, Lightkeeper used to live with his family, but snakes once crawled into their house, and they simply fell short to escape from the attack and died from venomous bites. Whether it's a tale or not, no one knows for sure, but it's not that hard to believe in. That is why Queimada Grande is off limits to tourists, but you can take a peek on it from water and, especially if keeping some distance, even fishing and diving. UN Buffer Zone, Cyprus. And sometimes your neighbors seem to be people, but it is thanks to their actions that part of the islands of Cyprus happen to be closed to the public. In general, Cyprus is a resort island, full of life and entertainment, but just as it became a stumbling block between the lands of Greece and Turkey, the island is divided between the two countries. The buffer zone, or as it is also called, the Green Line or Attila, divides the city of Nicosia, which had once been ancient capital of Cyprus. The borders of this zone are guarded by the United Nations peacekeeping forces, and living anywhere near this zone is simply prohibited. And since the borders were formed relatively recently, after the armed conflict between countries in 1974, Nicosia has turned into the desolated ancient city in which there is not a soul, and for ordinary tourists it is simply impossible to get there. Hawaiian island Niihau. But in order to turn into a closed area, a conflict between the two countries isn't necessary. It's fine just to be the island of Niihau. Niihau Island is owned by the Robinson family, who once bought the island for $10,000 and are at pains to preserve the local culture, closing it for tourists since 1915. Niihau has no telephone service, no cars, and no paved roads. Locals use horses and bicycles as transport. Solar batteries fully supply locals with electricity, although the city does not have such benefits of civilization as running water. On the island, people supply themselves with fruits and vegetables cultivation, fishing and hunting. Since there are about 150 people living there, they mainly work on the ranch of the Robinsons, the owners of the islands. Despite all the prohibition, you can get to the island via an invitation from a local Hawaiian or Robinson family. You can take a look at the island during a cruise or helicopter tour, but you won't be able to go ashore. North Sentinel Island, India. But the preservation of the local culture does not always look friendly. Sometimes it becomes a deadly event, as in the case of an Indian island, which is still inhabited by Aborigines from the Stone Age. The first horrors about the wild island shook things up back in the 19th and 20th centuries, but spine-chilling stories are still happening. In 2018, American John Chow went to the Aborigines to convert its inhabitants to Christianity. He made several attempts to get to the island, during the first of which the locals kicked him out, but at the second he was simply shot by the bow and arrow. This story hyped and the whole world turned its attention to the history of the island. However, as it turned out, no one knows anything about it. No one knows what language the locals speak and how many of them live on the island, and the locals themselves have no idea what kind of world surrounds them, so they consider it hostile. People who accidentally found themselves too close to the territory of a wild tribe disappeared more than once off the coast. The last famous case is the story of two fishermen who went crabbing off the coast of Sentinel Island. Without further ado, the locals killed the fishermen, and when a police helicopter flew in for their bodies, they simply threw spears at it. From now on, the territory of the island and those adjacent to it are under the prohibition of India to visit. Therefore, the island was and still remains the most mysterious and closed territory in the world. North Brother Island, USA. An island doesn't have to be inhabited to terrify people. In 1880, a large hospital was opened on North Brother Island, almost in the heart of New York, where the most dangerous and contagious diseases were treated: typhus, smallpox, leprosy, and scarlet fever. And for many years, as long as the hospital existed, entry to the island was strictly prohibited. It functioned until the 1930s, and then was converted into a rehabilitation center for teenage drug addicts, but this center lasted only until 1963, after which it was hastily closed without explanation. Since then, the hospital has turned into a desolated island where there is not a living soul, although there is no official restriction on visiting today. It's all the fault of the terrifying stories that you can still catch a fatal disease on the island or encounter the restless souls of the dead. However, there will always be bold spirits ready to risk their lives to explore the island themselves, which is why photographer Christopher Payne, who visited the island in 2008 and took many spectacular shots of the empty walls of the hospital, wound up there. However, not many people dare to visit the island even now. Poveglia Island, Italy. But you know what could be even chillier and darker than an abandoned hospital on an island? Abandoned psychiatric hospital on an island. To this day, the small island and the building of a mental health facility are off limits for tourists. The history of the island wasn't initially so gloomy. People have lived there since the 5th century, but in the 14th century during the war, the locals had to move to the neighboring island, destroying Poveglia so the enemies couldn't have it. After the end of the war, for some reason, no one returned to the island. That's when everyone began to avoid it. In the same 14th century, the plague came to Italy, and the island turned into one large infirmary and at the same time a grave for the plague. Moreover, not only the sick were brought to the island, but also the bodies of those who died from the plague, as well as those who were only supposedly infected with the plague. This infirmary existed until the 19th century. And in 1922, a hospital for the mentally ill was opened on the island, where, according to rumors, awfully cruel experiments were carried out on patients that led to their death. Doctors and patients constantly heard voices within the walls of the hospital, where a lobotomy was carried out. Finally, in 1968, the hospital was closed after the mysterious death of its chief physician, who mysteriously fell out of the tower window. Since then, people have left the island. Only an empty hospital, church, and fort remain there. It is simply impossible to get there. Gruinard Island, Scotland. An island doesn't have to be a graveyard for plagues and lunatics to become off-limits. It simply has to fall into the hands of scientists. Gruinard Island has been used for biological weapons testing since 1942. According to the reports, this is the place where anthrax was tested. During these tests, scientists discovered that after infection, 95% of people die from anthrax, and it is able to remain active for many years. From 1986 to 1990, the so-called purges of the island were carried out, after which scientists declared that Gruinard was habitable again. But people were in no hurry to move there. The first to get to the island were the archaeologists, who discovered during excavations in the soil spores of a perfectly active anthrax, and greater half of the scientific community in the world is sure that the island won't be habitable for humans for another few hundred years. There is no official ban on visiting from the authorities. However, apart from a couple of film crews who made documentaries about the history of the island, no one has visited. Svalbard, Norway. Well, we'll wrap up the top of forbidden places not with mysticism and not even dangerous trials, but with a place called the Doomsday Vault. On one of the islands of the Svalbard archipelago in Norway, there is a special bunker located in a rock at a depth of 150 meters, which stores more than 1 million species of crops from around the world. The total area of the Svalbard Seed Vault is more than 1,000 square meters, but only the entrance of the concrete structure can be seen from the outside. Each country received its own compartment in this bank of plants. The purpose of such a seed storage is to prevent their destruction as a result of possible global catastrophes, such as the fall of an asteroid, nuclear war, or global warming. It is difficult to get to the island, and it is unlikely that someone will let you in there. But keep calm, the world is ready for the apocalypse. The world is still full of mysterious and forbidden places. We have discussed only a dozen of them. Do not forget to like and leave comments if you'd like to see more of such stories. Goodbye, see you in new collections of intriguing facts.